Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 161 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am, as always, one of your hosts, Emilson, and joining me, we have my co host, Namali.
Hello.
And this week, we're going to be talking about keys. We have one of the other new affixes that has been out this week, Afflicted. And
Mm-hmm.
we have both been afflicted with Zskarn Progression at the same time.
Been fun. Been fun.
Along with that, Diablo 4 early access is out. If you pre-ordered the game, you can start playing, and it's had a much smoother launch than its predecessor.
Yeah. And maybe we should jump right into that. That way we get the Diablo stuff out of the way, and then we can we
Sure.
can focus on WoW the rest of the time. But yeah, I mean, I will be 100% honest with you. I might have done one key, but to be fair, I don't think I have to. Actually, you know what? I did a key or two on my evoker. So, not on my monk though. But yeah, I mean, I've been heads down at Diablo 4. Honestly, I think they had one login queue last night, or not
Okay.
even last night, like around 4 or 5 Eastern. There was like the random 30-minute queue to log in.
Okay.
But that cleared up within the hour. And other than that, I mean, there's been like I think the standard, like I've definitely hit some lag where like I'll rubber band, or like they'll be like, you know, just abilities will be delayed and it'll take a little bit for them to process. But in general, like launched super smooth. Like I mean, it is a far cry from Diablo 3 launch, which if people don't remember, like it took days to get into Diablo 3.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
just random errors, like you couldn't even sit in queue for anything. So no, it's funny. It's been a really good launch. I'll say the other thing that surprised me about the game. Number one, I think it's a fine game. I think it's sort of builds a little bit upon. I mean, I'm not at end game yet, but at least like the leveling up thing is seems to be different enough from Diablo 3 that it's interesting. The classes are all different.
It's
I'm
much
playing
less
Necro.
linear than Diablo 3, which is
Yeah.
something that I think I'll appreciate more when I'm leveling up another character. So I won't be base Diablo 3 did not have adventure mode to have that kind of non-linear leveling.
Hmm.
That didn't come until later in the game's lifespan. So early on in the game, if you wanted to level another character, you were just playing through the campaign again, which is how Diablo 2 worked, right? But
Yeah.
it kind of didn't age super well.
No.
Um, but yeah, it's much more open than Diablo
Yeah.
3's
You could.
leveling was.
Yeah. Because you do either the first three acts in any order, and then I think there's a fourth act. To be fair, I've read nothing about the game, so like I'm literally going in blind. Like okay, I lied. I did Google how to get a mount because you can get mounts in the game.
Yeah,
Um,
you have to complete
but
the
I
campaign, right?
It's like at the start of Act 4,
Oh,
you get a
okay.
quest to get it. So you have to get to Act 4 and for spoilers. But I knew nothing about how the game worked, and sort of was just sort of going in as blind as I could be. And I've had a ton of fun. Um, I think the other thing, so gameplay wise, I'm playing a Necro with summons because that's typically any new ARPG I play. I like playing the summon like pet build. The summons suck. So well, I don't know. I still kill things pretty quickly. I think eventually we'll respec into something that isn't summons based, just because there's not enough like points in the point tree to really buff up them. But not that type of podcast. But I will say the art is surprisingly different. So that was the one thing where when you see still photos of Diablo 4 and you put them next to Diablo 3, in still they look very similar. Um, but playing the game and like seeing the animations and all the like the way that the environment and stuff like that interacts with like the color palettes, all that fun stuff. Diablo 4 is a much darker game, like in theming, in like general feel. Like
Yeah,
Diablo 3 seemed like like the fun factory, like let's put like all my clown mask and like it's really a demon. Ah, I'm scary. Where like Diablo 4 is like it looks like a flesh-eating monster is trying to rip your face off. Like um the tone is much different. I think the art style is a little bit darker. So I'm enjoying my time in Diablo 4. I've put yeah, probably like 10 or 15 hours into it since Thursday. So
yeah.
played a fair amount of it. But going like I said, going slowly. So like I'm doing like it's an open world, so that's the other difference is you're not like teleporting to different spaces. It's like you can run from like zone to zone.
Right.
And really the only loading bars are like when you load into dungeons or load into like an instance basically. I've been like doing a bunch of side stuff, side quests are everywhere.
Yeah.
Um it feels almost like like an action RPG version of WoW in terms of like, or just an MMO in general, not specifically WoW, but like,
I've heard it
um,
compared a lot to like Lost Ark. Um,
yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think Lost Ark has a lot more MMO elements to it
okay.
than Diablo 4, but in terms of like pacing and moving around the world and the way like the zones connect and what you can do, I'd agree. It's very similar to Lost Ark. Yeah.
Yeah, I have 0 hours played on Lost Ark, so I have no like concept of like how they compare. I just have heard that
Yeah.
comparison made repeatedly that it's like, Lost Ark without the, pay to win
That's
crafting
the other thing. Yeah.
stuff at the end of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny. Lost Ark, little aside, is like my top 3 played game on Steam. And I only played it for like 3 months. I have over like 200 hours into it.
Oh my god.
Something ridiculous. I played a ton of that game. But yeah, no, I could see the comparisons. But no, I'd say Diablo 4, like at least not end game, but like getting to the end game. So I think I'm level 35, like 35 to 40 in there. Just about to finish Act 3, so I haven't started Act 4 yet. I mean, I give it like an 8.5, 9. Like I think it's a really good game, at least for the level up experience. So
Yeah.
um
This is definitely one of those games where if what you care about is endgame and you haven't bought it yet, just wait for like 2-3 weeks for people
yeah.
to like play the end game and like get real opinions on the part of the game that you care about. But if that's not your like, if you just like are more like me, where I'll play it and like even when the new season comes out, I'll go and I'll play for a bit, but I'm not spending a ton of time at end game usually. The last
Yeah.
season of Diablo 3, I actually spent a ton of time playing the end game. Um, but that was like really unusual for me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'll wait to see how the end game works. I mean, like I said, I'm not there. I don't think any of my friends are there just yet. So we're still
yeah,
sort of all leveling up. So
no
I
idea
haven't
how
heard
good it
much
is
about
yet.
it, but yeah,
The
that'll be the make or break, I think, for it. So
Yeah, I've been playing a fire sorceress, which is
oh nice.
you were commenting on the animations. The fire sorceress animations are extremely good. Um,
Nice.
very very fun, except for fireball, which looks like this dink, like it is a fireball, but it's this very small dinky little fireball,
Yeah.
and but it you know does things, so you cast it, um, and that's been very fun. Uh, I'm a sucker for the kinds of builds where you have like when an enemy dies, it does like an explosion and it does damage to things around it. Those are always super fun for me. Like in
Yeah.
D3, I played the I don't spell the quaking palm kind of thing.
Oh, okay, yeah, for monks. Yep.
That that when it died, especially with the legendaries, it died, and then it applied it to the ones around it, did a bunch of damage, and it would like chain reaction and kill everything. So
Exactly.
so sorceress has one where you can put fireball in your enchantment slot, and when things die, they do a fireball
Oh, nice.
explosion,
Nice.
and so you can just like set everything up with a bunch of burning effects, and then trigger the explosion, and they all just like evaporate. Yeah, that's super cool. I'm
Nice.
just a huge sucker for
No, that's
it.
awesome.
It's
Yeah,
not
no, yeah,
very good on bosses because nothing dies on the boss except the boss. So
yeah, I will say so with the necro, you have to summon your minions based on having corpses, and on bosses, it's real rough. If like it was rough early, and then I hit a break point where now I generate a corpse every so much damage I do. So
yeah,
like I can get some of my minions back, but yeah, if a boss doesn't spawn ads, it's rough for my class.
yeah,
But no, I'm having fun. We'll probably try and finish Act 3 tonight and do a little bit of Act 4. Really, I want to get my mount and then go back because I've skipped a bunch of dungeons. I guess that's
yeah,
the other thing is like the aspect of like legendary power system is all based on you get the powers for finishing dungeons basically.
yeah,
And so like I have to go back and I did all the ones for Necro as I'm going through, but I left all the like the general ones or the class specific ones to do. So
I've only
no,
done some of the dungeons. There's one that I went out of my way to do that gives a aspect fire sorceress, so I went and did
yeah.
it. It was a little bit out of my way, but then I realized I don't have any of the materials to use to like use it yet. Uh,
I found that out too. So I don't have any aspects on or whatever they're called. I don't have any of them on my gear right now.
yeah, I have gotten a few like 3 4 legends at this point,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's just like low level legendaries don't give you the resource to like put aspects on your gear or what it is. But I'm also only like level 25, right? This is not.
Yeah. Not endgame just yet. Yeah, I've dismantled a couple of legendaries and haven't gotten all the material. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see. But no, it's I mean Diablo 4, I'd say if you're into if you're into the ARP genre, at least for like playing a new one, I think it's worth picking up. I think your point's really good. It's like if you want something that has like repeatability and you want to grind the end game, I'd say wait a couple weeks, get the reviews on how the end game actually plays out, and
Yeah.
then pick it up.
And like to some degree, that also I think depends on how you want to play the end game. Because if you want to go in kind of blind and just like play around with things,
Yeah.
honestly, just like play now because nobody knows what the hell is going on because there were balance patches in between like the last beta
Yeah.
and now. Like things are
Or
really
even
up
on
in the
Friday. To
air.
be fair, even on Friday they put balance patches out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but if you just want to like jam the end game and play some neat builds and like not have to figure it all out for yourself, I would definitely wait a couple weeks and see what people think of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Speaking of dungeons, though, we have this new Mythic Plus affix in WoW, which is
Do.
actually what our podcast is supposed to be about.
It
and
is.
and that's been interesting. I will say that. So what this affix is? This is the one afflicted that you have to either heal or do a friendly dispel. So a detox kind of thing to
Mhm.
remove them. You pretty frequently get spawns of two of them at a time, regardless of pack size. Like very small packs you'll get one. Sometimes bosses you'll get one, but often even on bosses you'll get two. And unless you are very quick on the first dispel, you can only get one of them. There are like shaman can do two at a time with poison cleansing totem. There's evokers that can use their AoE dispel and get them. Mass dispel actually notably does not work.
Because they're not a part of your group.
No, it's because they don't have a magic effect. It's like
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh yeah, because Mass still even works outside of your group. Yeah, fair enough.
um so yeah, I think the thing for this affix, if you're playing monk, which you should be, 'cause monk is fun, um, it's really easy. Like it's so free. It's
Yeah.
it's like you just like I've done a bunch of them where I have just done all of them because you can if you're very quick about getting the first dispel, get the first one and then your dispel is back for the second one, but you do have to be on top of it, so you
Hmm.
have to be paying attention to it. Um, but like you really want like 2 to 3 people in your group that can do it, and when pugging, I would definitely go for three, which is kind of unfortunate because that really is restrictive on your group.
Yeah, there's not a lot of hybrids that have a dispel, like some sort of like curse, poison, or disease dispel. So
Yeah,
I mean the other option too is you can heal them up, so you can like dispel one and then try and heal the second if you get two. There is an interesting interaction with the heal, which I don't know if they fixed, but I know that earlier on in the week you could actually heal them up the second they spawned. Um,
okay.
Basically, if you had something down that was ticking on them, where you could tick. So I think the way it worked is, and this is what we
Oh,
theorized, is that they spawn it at full HP. So if you
right.
heal them while they're still at full HP,
They
the
just
game
immediately
thinks
go
you've topped
away.
them off, and they immediately go away. And then they take a health reduction, or you'd have to top them from there. And so
Yeah,
like druids with like efflorescence or like even essence font for monks was enough, right? And a
yeah,
couple other classes could do this. I don't know if they fixed it, but there is a way to game it if you're on top of like essentially getting lucky that you get a heal tick the moment that it spawns in,
right.
and you can top it
It
immediately.
sounds really
Um,
hard to do reliably.
I mean, they were. I forget. Someone was talking about it in the Mistweaver section of the Discord. Like they were able to reliably do it. At least a druid was, just because I think the way that
Okay.
Efflo ticks, and they could get it fairly consistently with Essence Font. I think you just had to be close to where the mob was spawning in to then
Yeah.
trigger Essence Font,
And
and
then so
then
you would want to be channeling Essence Font. So
yeah,
if you haven't done this affix yet, there's a pre-spawn animation. So this isn't like you're not relying on a weak aura to tell you that these are going to spawn in 3 seconds, so you need to start channeling Essence Font. You can
yeah,
watch for the animation and start your Essence Font channel, and then hopefully if you're standing next to it, You just like
Bolt
get
will
an
hit him.
essence font bolt, I guess, on them immediately when they spawn, and it just goes away.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like they were doing. So, I mean, it's not 100% reliable, but it definitely makes the affix slightly easier if you can pull it off.
Yeah,
But I thought that was interesting in that, yeah, that it spawns in it at max HP and then the game reduces it. So if you can catch it in that, I don't know, probably half second, quarter second that it's still at max HP and get a heal on it, it basically makes the mob disappear. So,
yeah. That
um,
all that said, if they go off, honestly, not that bad. Like you don't
it's
want it to happen. It's minus 100% haste, and it stacks. So if you let both go off, you're at minus 200% haste. It does affect your resurrection spells. So if you ever wanted to like see what would happen if you had negative 200% haste while casting your res, I can tell you it takes 30 seconds.
Jesus, that's funny. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, so I mean it's not terrible. I mean it's definitely not a good thing to let continually go off,
Yeah,
but not terrible in terms of yeah, the downside of it. But yeah, I mean I'd say like this one it's an interesting affix. The other thing too with afflicted is that in people, at least from a healing perspective, if you're going to try and heal them off or even just dispel them in general, like there's no unit frames for them. So like you're never going to see like a unit frame for the afflicted mob. Like where you'd see maybe your party frames or like boss frames or
right.
something like that. There's just nothing like that for the mob. So it can be a little bit difficult if you're not used to, as a healer, like playing not inside of your bars, right? Looking at more where mobs are spawning or
Yeah,
players are and healing and
they
taking action
do.
that way. So,
So one thing that I think a lot of people ran into the first couple of days of this, they do have friendly nameplates. Friendly nameplates are not something that can be controlled by add-ons.
mhm.
Um, blame Infinity on Star Augur, somebody on, or was it Strawberry Puppy? Somebody on Star Augur, you know, did some really neat tech, and now the rest of us don't get to have nice things.
You had a line to your partner and you would just run into them. It would assign
Yes,
you who to clear with. Yeah.
yes. And
Yeah.
so player has an option on it though. So there's these internal settings called CVARs that you can control. Most of them you actually there's like a bunch that you can't control through the default UI. That were just like built and then they decided not to expose them in the default settings, but Plater can set a bunch of them. One of them is hide Blizzard nameplates for friendly NPCs. Um, and a bunch of people have that on. So a bunch of people like day one could not see afflicted nameplates.
Yeah.
So that is definitely something. I think there was a post like in the details slash Plato Discord about how to turn that back on. I've seen other posts, like in my guild Discord and other places about how to turn that back on. But if you're playing it and you cannot see afflicted nameplates, they do exist. You need to make sure that your add-ons are not setting that CVAR to hide the nameplates.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, but it's definitely, I mean, it can be annoying if you're not used to healing that stuff. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think my
um,
my only real gripe with it is just the group comp restriction. Like
yeah.
having it go off is not a group wipe or anything like that. Like it's fairly manageable if it happens. It sucks. Like Brewmaster, you kind of don't really feel it, but it does reduce or increase the cooldown of your brews by a lot.
Hmm.
So that sucks. But like I've been playing my Blood DK a bunch in keys because I'm prepping it to go back into Zskarn tonight, and man, that class likes haste, and getting minus 100% or minus 200% haste, the class feels awful.
Oh, I can only imagine, like, because that affects like rune regeneration too for you, right? As a blood
Rune
DK.
regen, GCD, it
Yeah.
affects, like everything. And there's this feedback loop right now with Blood DK where you're spending a bunch of, like, you spend runic power, that gets your Vamp Blood back. Vamp Blood gives you a strength buff. Spending runes maintains the strength buff, and you, like, do this thing where you, like, are cycling through Vampiric Blood a lot to maintain, to, like, have that up, and also because Vampiric Blood is, like, a really good ability. Um,
Hmm.
and so, like, you get hit with minus 100% haste, and it all just falls apart.
God, that's
um,
funny.
but, like, we've had even some go off at really bad times, like on the Forge Master boss in Neltharis.
Hmm.
We had one go off during Bloodlust on the first, like, where he hits the anvil and does a ton of raid damage, and that's
Yeah.
like honestly like you list like things where you would expect minus 100% haste to just like kill you,
Right.
and that really healing intensive part there is like very high on the list, and it was spooky, but we were fine.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I can definitely think of like I think what is it? What was the one last week? Incorporeal. I think their debuff is almost worse.
Oh, I
The
agree.
the minus the minus 50% damage, right, and
Minus
healing. So
50% damage and healing. Yeah, that
yeah,
one is much much scarier, at least as a tank.
yeah,
Because even like the minus 100% haste, so Brewmaster doesn't affect it too much if you've but I guess in general, just like if you've already got resources pooled for something, the
hmm
haste doesn't really affect you as a tank that much. Like
right,
on Blood DK, if I'm sitting there and I've got runic power prepped for a mechanic, I've got a CD ready to go for a mechanic, and then I get minus 100% haste, it doesn't meet, like I still have all that stuff prepared.
right.
The uh issue is almost like if you have it happen enough before the mechanic that you can't actually prepare for it, you know? Or if you're in a very intensive situation where you need to be generating and spending those resources very, very quickly, like on some, the first pull I do in Neltharis is like 3 packs together, and
Yeah,
I hit, I have details like screenshots of that where I'm doing 300k HPS on my DK, all on myself, and
yeah.
that's the kind of situation where I think I would probably die on my DK if we had one go off there, because I'm just like, I'm not pooling, I am just like generating as quickly as I can so I can spend it in.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yes. I mean, um, yeah. I mean, to be fair, like I said, I don't think I've played it yet, so I don't know how. It sounds like from what I've read, it just sounds like it's like you mentioned, just annoying from a group composition perspective. Um, and yeah, it doesn't seem like it's too punishing at the end of the day. If you don't either dispel it or heal it up. So seems like
Yeah,
healing it up isn't really the play. I haven't heard much other than sort of trying to cheese the heal. I haven't heard much about people trying
it's
to
like
actually
a
heal them.
last resort kind of thing. Like, okay, other fun fact: Death Knights can actually use Death Coil on these to
Okay.
heal them up. Again, you really don't want to have to do that, but in a pinch, you can. So there's
Yeah.
definitely times where I've just swapped to it and just like sent Death Coils into it until it's topped up. It takes like 3, 2 if you get
hmm
lucky with crits, but usually 3, and then they're removed. That's like an entire runic power bar though, so that's tons of death strikes that you're not getting. So you can't do that all the time because sometimes that will just kill you if you're tanking, and if you're DPSing, that can like just send your DPS to, into the gutter.
yeah. True. 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 Um.
But yeah, I
Well.
think the dispel issue, like not just the group comp issue. You need like monks, shamans, uh, paladins. Like DPS priests can't do it. Any healer is fine. So you always have the healer. Well,
Right.
usually have the healer.
We'll talk. We'll
We'll
talk.
talk
Talk
about that.
about that.
Usually have the healer. Then you need like 1 to 2 of these other specs that can do the dispel. And the
Right.
one that's like a standout is Elemental Shaman. That with their, I don't know what it is about them, but so Shaman has Poison Cleansing Totem. It's on a 45-second cooldown. These spawn more frequently than every 45 seconds. So Enhancement and Restoration Shaman can just like Poison Cleansing Totem every other, and I have to do kind of the odd sets
hmm
regular way. Enhanced or Elemental Shaman has some kind of cooldown reduction for their totems that I have no idea how it works, but they do. Um, and can use Poison Cleansing Totem on every set. So if you get an Elemental Shaman, then you're just like cruising.
Yeah. You're good. You're good to go. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So that's that is the I think the maybe the biggest weakness of this. So, but it's interesting. I mean, it's a new affect's interesting. That we'll figure out how well people like it. But yeah, right now it's sort of your pure DPS classes sort of lose out. I guess other than mages, but yeah, the rest of them.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. I don't know. Maybe I know we're sort of
You want
jumping
to talk
around a little
about
bit here
these
today.
plus 24s that have been done without
Yeah, we
healers?
can. We can do that a little bit. So yeah, so I guess there was some news that came out really today, and I think this happened I think yesterday in terms of when it was done. But there were two plus 24 keys done: Bracken, Hide Hollow, and Halls of Infusion without a healer, basically a tank and 4 DPS. And they did have some. I mean, they did some hybrid DPS in there, right? You have Shadow Priest, Evoker, Ret Paladin, and Feral Druid, all with. I mean, all those classes have the ability to heal and then also have some like escape stuff that they can use. But yeah, they did a no healer. This group did two no healer 24s. um so I guess yeah, healer is no longer needed in Mythic Plus, I guess.
Again.
Again, yeah, I mean, I it's interesting because when you think about like I think the biggest issue, the biggest thing around like the fact that you can do no healer keys, I think just there's a twofold way to look at this, right? There's one where it's like, okay, these you have five very good players who hyper optimize themselves and hyper optimize their group to complete these keys without a healer, right? Is one way to look at it. And it
Yeah.
wasn't easy; it was difficult for them. And the other way to look at it is like maybe these dungeons or just dungeons in general need to do more damage. Which, like, from my experience pugging, it's like the last thing I want to see, right?
Yeah.
Because there are I mean there are certain bosses where like they did Brackenhide, right? But the first boss of Brackenhide puts a dot on you that doesn't go a bleed, essentially, that doesn't go away until you're over 90% health. You get healed over 90% health.
Right.
The problem is this group did two things. They ran Spore Cloak, I think, for most of their team, which is a very good defensive item. Takes up an embellishment slot, but
Yeah.
very good healing. And then they have classes that can get rid of bleeds easily, like
Yeah.
Bop.
Well, they
and
also just have the
devastation.
evoker. They have
And yeah,
the evoker, so they can all like group up and cauterize it off.
yeah, exactly. So
And
I
that
mean,
also applies in like Halls of Infusion, right? You think about the dragons. The dragons are scary, but if you have a Master Spell, they're like AoE damage comes from a magic dot, and
yeah,
so you like group up, drop a Master Spell on it, and you just don't take damage from it. Um,
exactly.
and since this is Fortified Week, the bosses are not nearly as scary in terms of damage output. So things like Vampiric Embrace, just personal self healing. Like Evokers actually have really good self healing, even though they're not super good for healing the rest of the group.
Hmm.
Nature's Vigil, not super good, but it's good enough.
Yeah,
It does do healing, and then of course both the Protection Paladin and the Retribution Paladin can spend Holy Power on Word of Glory.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, so there's a ton of like off healing from this group and a ton of just like coordination. So I mean, I would say like while it's interesting, I don't know how much it should impact the rest of the game, right? I think you've got these are the only two runs I think in season two. They're both by some very good players. Like you see a
Yeah,
couple of names that you should know about in there in the group, and it's just a hyper like not hyper optimized, but it's probably a very optimized group to play towards the mechanics in both
yeah.
these dungeons. So
So these dungeons are not the ones that I would have necessarily expected, but I guess after
yeah,
thinking about it, with the comp that they've got and the things that you can dispel, I'm not that surprised to see it on Fortified Week. Like Halls of
yeah,
Infusion has the frog boss that's pretty scary. It has the first boss that's pretty scary, but on you know Fortified Week, you can kind of probably just like Vamp Embrace the scary bit and then kill the boss.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's just the boss is dead. Um, so I guess I'm not like I believe that this is doable. Um,
yeah,
but then there's keys like Neltharis doing Forge Master without a healer. I
yeah,
don't know how you would do that outside of like some really jank shenanigans with immunities.
yeah,
Um, I just don't know like how do you live multiple of the anvil things? They happen too often to use something like Vamp Embrace on every one of them, versus like the frog
right,
boss. The cooldown on the broke is like 40 seconds or 45 seconds. So even if it takes you 2 minutes to do the boss, you get three of them and you can Vamp Embrace two of them.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say this becomes more of an issue. I'd say it's funny. The weird thing to me is that the no healer key becomes more of an issue if you start running lower keys with no healers.
Yeah,
Like when 16s and 17s are being done with no healers, and that's like now the meta. I'd
that's
say
a
that's when
problem. Yeah,
we have like a healer problem. Like doing 224s without healers, it's cool. I think maybe like most people, they'll probably blow it out of the water of like, hey, you don't need healers. This is crazy. But I mean, you have a like we said, I think you have a group centered around the idea like these are every class in here is like a hybrid, can off heal if needed, like has some very good like defensive utility, like we've mentioned, like that can counteract some of the things within the dungeon. So
yeah.
I think it's just a cool thing that people have done from personally, like until this becomes a like until I get into start to like pug my keys and I'm starting to see like 17s being like
No
no
healer.
healer, like 40 PS, right? Like
Yeah,
then I'll be like, okay, this is an issue here. But
yeah,
I think it's just a cool thing that some people pushed some
yeah.
content,
I
which is
I do
cool.
think that this is something that depends a lot on what key you're doing as to whether this is
Mhm.
even possible, right? Like I mentioned Neltharis. I don't know how you do this in Neltharis. Maybe I'm just not Galaxy brain enough to know how you do this in Neltharis, but I don't see how you make it work. Um, Freehold actually would also be very interesting. I think it might potentially be doable. You would need to like lust the pack with the two Shattering Bellow dudes to just
Yeah.
kill them before they kill you. Um, but potentially doable. Uh, there are a lot of bosses though that don't do very much group damage, and there are one of the things I noticed as I was playing my DK is that I mentioned that first pull that I do like 300k HPS on my DK. The healer, if we get the kicks on the molten core, does like 25k
Nothing. Yeah.
because I'm the only one taking damage. And I think that's kind of what you're going for if you're doing something like this is dungeons where you can either just have you like stuff that's interruptible or stoppable that you can do a lot with stuff like vampiric embrace or just kicks,
Mhm.
things that you can either mass dispel or cauterize, just all this kind of stuff that you can do to remove the damage instead of having something to or that just
Yeah.
doesn't do any damage in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, yeah, like where else could you maybe do make this work? Um, yeah, it'd be cool to see if I mean if they time every dungeon on 24, like good for them. I just think it's a cool thing that people are pushing. It's like to me, it's like the whole speed running aspect of like classic,
Yeah,
right? Where people try and do like a raid as fast as possible. It's like, yeah, you can hyper optimize your group to clear it, but you don't need to. And I think in this case, it's like it's just a group of people who are like trying to do this whole like no lever stuff, which I find fun. So
yeah. And I mean, Cyber, who's one of the people that did this, posted that they did a 23 Neltharian's lair as well.
yeah,
Um, which is interesting. Like, I guess they nerfed Neuraxis, and that would
yeah,
be probably the pain point is doing Neuraxis. But again, fortified Neuraxis is not as bad on fortified.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of wild though.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's a cool little thing they're pushing, but yeah, I think a lot of people will be like, "Oh, bosses do no damage," or I think that was maybe even Jack's response to it. And I'm like, come on, Jack, you're not pugging 16s, bud. So yeah, bosses do damage, or really people take damage doing bosses. We'll
Yeah, it turns
say
out that when your entire group avoids all of the damage, you don't need very much healing.
exactly,
And on
exactly.
some level, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like yeah, I will tell you though that he stressed the hell out of me, and like that's the one thing. Like I've been playing Devastation a bunch like the last 2 weeks, just because honestly, I'm gonna go all augmentation evoker if it
Oh
pans out to be
boy.
good. I'm having a ton of like I did a key on PTR actually, which I never do. And like that was fun. As augmentation. So DPS is the most chill thing. Like after playing healer for all these years, I forget how much like you just can just zone out, do your rotation, like mechanic or two hits, and maybe you move for it. Maybe you don't because you have a healer. And so like yeah, it's
Hmm.
definitely a different world in
Hmm.
keys. And even in raid, like going from Rashok to Zskarn in terms of healing, which we haven't really talked about that, but
You want to get into
it's
that?
just I mean we can, yeah. Let's just jump into maybe progression stuff. We're kind of all over the place today, but yeah, I mean I'll say healing Zskarn is like honestly, eh, I think we talked about this when we talked about Pantheon in was that was in
Sepulcher.
Vault or
Sepulcher.
Sepulchre, sorry. Um, but Pantheon was like a mechanic vomit, I think is how we described or how I
Yeah.
described it, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of mechanics don't really make sense, are all over the place. Like Sikarn is the same idea, except the mechanics sort of make sense together. They just all happen at the same time every time, it feels like. Like, there's never a point where you are like, you have a piece of breathing room or like you're basically setting up for only one mechanic. It's always like, okay, we have trap spawning, plus I have to make sure these lines don't hit people, plus I'm gonna get knocked back, plus the boss is moving as I'm getting knocked back. So to make sure I'm in a position where the boss moving doesn't affect negatively the rest of the raid. And then like, okay, if I'm gonna get knocked back, I need to dodge traps. I have to look behind me. But then as I'm getting knocked back, a random trap spawns. I'm in the middle of a trap. So do I roll or port? But I can't port because my port's down where there's another trap. So it's like, dude, it's literally like and then all of this while trying to watch raid frames and heal people, while also making sure that I can be in range of most people. So like I need to make sure like I can back away from the boss slightly because somebody's been knocked and now they're killing a golem or they're disabling a trap far away and they all of a sudden get the debuff. So like they're gonna die because they have like the blast wave debuff plus the embers debuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit. And then like, yeah, like I will say that like right off the bat, I think Rashok, it's so weird because Rashok, even as healing intensive as that fight was, it never felt unfair.
It's
Like it
very
never felt,
structured.
yeah, it never felt like if I get hit by a wave, it means I planted at the wrong spot. So like I need to make sure I adjust moving forward, or like, that even if two waves are coming, I could have moved differently, right? It felt not unfair, right? In
Yeah.
terms of like I could see the thing coming. Okay. Like Zskarn feels unfair. Like I found out some fun facts about this fight, which I think is stupid. Like bombs when they land will push you away from their landing position.
Yes.
Died to that, by the way, because I got pushed into a line as the lines go off.
Oh. I
Yeah,
mean, the
that's
alternative
fun.
is that you die to the bomb exploding on you, which is maybe
Or like
fairer.
just like half a second trigger time. Like don't make the bombs active as soon as they hit. Like let them hit trigger. So like if I'm standing and don't move, I'm an idiot. Like don't make it push me in a random direction into something. Right. And so like anyway, I guess you're right. I could have moved from it, but that's annoying. And it's just like every time you do that fight, it's different, but it's not, it's like which is fine, but like I think the trap RNG is like where like we have had some polls where the entire middle is clear
Yeah.
and it is beautiful and no random trap spawn and we are moving cleanly from side like from each side for the tactical destructions. It's great.
Yeah.
And there are other like we did one attempt where the three random traps spawn 1, 2, 3 across the middle. And so like we couldn't pull straight through. We had to like loop
We had the
around.
same thing happen. I
And
think
you're just
that's
like,
I think that's my
ugh.
big gripe with the fight. So they did this thing where on heroic and normal, you have one random trap that spawns and two that spawn under the boss. And on mythic, it goes up from one random trap to two. And I think that that's a lot more than double the difficulty of
Yeah.
one random trap. Not only because, now you have more traps, there's a tighter check on the boss overall, which they've now nerfed the boss HP to compensate for. Um, but also because one random trap can never wall you off. One random trap can never put you in a situation where you have to take the long way around. It just can't with the way that the size of these traps, right? It just can't do that. Um, So, two random traps though can totally wall you off of something, and I think that's really like a major pain point on this fight is the fact that the two traps, just like from a geometry perspective, can really, really cause so many more problems than one random trap. If it were, one random trap, but the boss casts traps more often, or maybe it was like one random trap, and then like periodically there would be another random trap that just didn't spawn at the same time, right? So you're
Yeah.
you're getting them, and so currently traps are on like a 30 something second cooldown. So if you got like a random trap every 15 seconds, but you didn't ever get two at the same time, it would reduce the kind of like, oh, we just instantly got walled off from where we were just about to go.
Yeah.
Um, or honestly, probably the worst one that we've had is we were all set up for a blast wave to come out. Blast wave came out at the same time as traps spawned, and people just got pushed into the traps, and just the entire range group has the trap dot now, which is very not good from a
She's,
healing perspective. Like if you look at the amount of damage that you take per tick of that, that's like the dot on Rashok. If you've done Mythic Rashok, the dot that you get from doing the charged smash soak is really big. It's like 70k a second on the raid. Rashok is not designed for you to have that on the whole group at the same
no.
time, and just there is an overlap where you get traps activating as Blast Wave goes out, and having them spawn and like just in a wall behind the ranged, and then they get knocked through them or into them is, kind of bullshit.
Yeah. No, and the other thing too, that even if you don't get knocked into the trap, right? Like we've had situations where ranged have been knocked past a trap, like have been knocked, trap spawns, and then they have to walk around the trap to get back in range of the rest of the raid. And like in that time, they have the blast wave dot on them, plus maybe they get the embers dot, and
Yeah,
then they're dead.
yeah,
Because like granted they can probably like maybe they could push a personal, use a healthstone, right? But if all that is down, like they're not getting back in range in time. So it's just
yeah,
the random trap. And like there's also other things where like movement for us, like you're probably doing the same thing where like the boss basically hugs the edge of the room until
yeah,
you get a tactical destruction, which is the room clear, like denial thing for half the room,
yeah.
and then you move the boss basically diagonal or like basically straight across the other side and do a
Right.
similar move and then like pull. And what we've found too is that we'll get random traps on those edges, which means like we'll have to pull the
Yeah.
boss away from the edge, which puts traps close to the middle, which then cuts off some of like the
Yeah.
angles.
So
It's
we have a setup for our trap clearing. We have kind of like three tiers of like priority of what you clear with your gadget from the golems, which is another thing. I'll get to that in a second. The golem stuff is we'll get to that. Um
hate it, by the way.
um the so we have a three-tier system. Like you clear anything that's in the like center star. There's like six traps in a pattern around the
Hmm.
center and like a star. You clear anything in there. We just need that be able to just move through the center of the arena. So you clear that first. Then we've got some markers scattered around that are the priority markers of like you need to clear this if there's a trap on it. And after that, we have like a lane that we've got between two markers that we're like, okay,
Yeah.
if there's none in the center, there's none on the markers, then you clear something that's in this lane area that we've laid out. And if there's nothing in any of those, you hang on to it because you've got a minute to use the buff.
Yeah.
And we will get two more sets of traps before you have to do that. And the odds of all of the traps spawning in good location and you just not needing to use it is just zero. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
It's not literally zero, but it is very close to it. Um, it's yeah, and I mean, I think another thing about this is the cadence of the golem spawns is bad. It's
It it lines up with every tactical destruction.
I mean, so yeah, there's that, which is frustrating and annoying and pushes you really, really hard to have two DKs at least in your raid, because otherwise, like, what are you gonna do? You can't
You're not going to kill
efficiently
them in
kill
time.
them. They have too much health to just kind of like YOLO range DPS at them, right? You have to be efficient about it, or you're gonna die. Um, but there's like you get too many traps before the first set of golems. You
Isn't
get
it? It's three spawns.
you get so the first set of you get two sets of traps, then golems, but then by the time like before you've actually managed to kill the golems, and I think this is the important
Yeah.
part. The amount of health that the golems have, the amount of time you have to delay from the spawn to actually killing them because of the tactical destruction, like you have to cross the room, you have to bring them across the room with you. You can't damage them very much before
God,
that
it's so stupid.
because
Oh,
of the
I hate
CC
this.
immunity. If you damage them
Why?
too much, they hit 50% health, they become CC immune, and then they just walk away right? So you can't
Into the
damage them
tactical
there
destruction.
into the tactical destruction. Yes.
Every time, beeline furthest point away from the
Yes.
raid, they are
Yeah.
heading in there if you do that. Oh,
And so you end up delaying the clear of the kill of the golems by like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, because of the timing with the tactical destruction. I mean, all right, it's probably not that long. You're looking at quite a bit of a delay from when they spawn. So by the time you actually kill them and have the gadgets that you can use to clear traps, you've gotten one, potentially two more sets of traps.
yeah.
And to some degree, like, play better. But also, there's just a ton of variance. Like, we had a set where we had everything grouped up and we were about to, like, just go nuts on the golems, and another set of traps happened. And it put random traps on the golems.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what are you going to do? Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And I think the other problem with it, like the DK issue, the issue is also when they're spawning, is they're
Yeah.
spawning during the tactical destruction. So like the idea is you can't, to your point, you can't DPS. Well, you can. So like what we've ended up doing, at least in our strat, is we pull, because we have two, we're running actually two DKs, is we pull the close two in, kill them as we're moving,
Yeah.
and then pull the rest of them with us, the other two with us, or the three. Basically, we focus one. If we can get a second one, great. If we can't, you basically pull 2 to 3 with you to the other side.
Yeah.
And then like stun and push back them so you can blow them up quickly with outside of the tactical destruction. But it's just, yeah, I mean, that's the problem is you'll have between 12 and 16 traps active just from like the common spawns before you get your first set of clears.
Yeah.
And then you can clear some, but then like you might use all your clears and you get a random one in a bad spot for you. And then it's
Yeah.
like, well,
And then you have to
yeah.
wait.
Yeah, then you have to wait and move around it. And then the other thing too we found is like the tank movement is really precise too, because like in certain cases with tactical destruction is if you don't start moving, we've had this weird thing where like we're starting to move the boss before and the rest of the raid stays back.
Yeah.
Because we'll get a trap trigger as we're moving the boss across the arena. Then we get not only random spawns, we get
But
two spawns under them
yeah.
underneath of it. Yeah.
So that's with the change, like, I think that in general, the change to make the tactical destruction baited on the raid made the fight harder.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It made the fight harder. But what it does let you do is, so we pull the boss, and this is actually like we pull the boss pretty far away from, like, we don't cross the center line, but we pull it pretty far away from the tactical destruction, like, dragon head that we are activating. And then I can hit AMS and Death's Advance and just yeet it across the room at top speed, and get it into position for the next set of traps. That works on the first tactical destruction. On the second one, you really can't, because immediately after it does the traps. So we're actually just, I think our plan right now is just to like drop those traps in the center, because it goes like dragon heads, traps, blast wave. And if you pull the boss, if you can actually manage to get the boss all the way to the edge, but if you do that, then everybody gets blast wave back into the tactical destruction and dies.
Yeah.
So so we're just like accepting those traps are going to be really bad.
Yeah, we ran into that too. Yeah, I mean, it's just I think like in all my time sort of doing like progression bosses, like I think this is probably one of the worst ones just in terms of that RNG. Like I think having randomness in a fight is fine. The problem with the randomness here is that it basically makes it so you're doing things on the fly. Like there's never a point where you're doing the same thing every time. Like your movement can be slightly different, your positioning is slightly different every time. And to some of the stuff we've said today, like sometimes you can't outplay the positioning, right? You get knocked into something as it's like you get knocked into a trap as it's triggering.
Right.
And like you're then essentially, unless you have a defensive up or like Hellstone health pot, right? You're going to die from that sort of combination. It's just it sucks. And even from like a healing CD perspective, like typically if we could know that's going to happen, we'll put stronger CDs at that point.
Right.
So we know we can cover it and then we'll move like weaker ones, other ones. But every blast wave has that sort of combination. And so you basically can't have your strongest CDs up or double up CDs for every blast wave. You just need to sort of spread them. So it's been a frustrating set of progression. We've definitely died to stupid things. Like we've died to the whole idea of bombs spawning as we're moving and like a DPS running into it and dying because like they didn't see it because it's a full clump of people. And I mean, you can always call that out and be a little bit better about where you're specifically positioning. But yeah, I mean, we've died to that. We've died to bomb overlaps, which is sort of kind of annoying, where you have like two bombs placed right on top of each other, and we're out of immunities. Like we don't have a bop, and we don't
Right.
have a paladin with bubble, and so it's like you have to like our tank that's doing the soaking is like really inching into one, hoping
So
it triggers, and then
we have a brewmaster doing it. Brewmaster is really really good at doing bombs. Really really really
nice.
good. The initial damage from them gets staggered as physical damage, so they're very very tanky and can just kind of like hit celestial brew and walk into it. And if it's a double stack, who cares?
That's awesome. Yeah,
Um,
we have an alt prot paladin doing it.
yeah.
So
Um, and so we have run into the like getting knocked into a bomb that just spawned though. That is pretty tilting. I think on the whole, like the worst part about this fight is actually that it's really close to being a good fight.
I would agree. I mean, for me personally, like I think they need to like just playing the fight. And I think we mentioned this when we were sort of setting up, but for me personally, like the traps seem to spawn like 2x the amount of time. Like they're basically like everything else is on a 1x timer and traps are on a 2x timer for spawning, it feels like.
Yeah,
Maybe 1.5x. But in essence, I think like
that
the
is
trap
actually pretty
spawn
close
rate,
to accurate though.
yeah,
It's a 35-second cooldown for traps. The the golems spawn every minute 10. The time tactical destruction is every like minute in 5. And blast wave is about the same spawn rate as traps,
yeah.
and bombs are about the same spawn rate as traps. So there's like two different sets of timers going on. There's the 1 minute ish stuff and the 30-second ish stuff, and then there's fucking elimination protocol that's just like constantly going off. That is one thing actually that I think would be really really good to improve. So if I were going to fix this fight, which obviously armchair designer here, like
Yeah.
I've never done it, but like there's a couple things, just a couple, like honestly not even big things that would make this fight significantly better. Number one, random traps should never spawn next to each other.
Yeah.
Just like you don't even need to reduce the number of random traps, although that would be nice. Like just if they can never spawn next to each other, then suddenly that like and you can like have it fall back, right? So like at the end of the fight when there's only stuff that is, next to each other, you can just give up and spawn them next to each
Yeah.
other. At that point,
Yeah.
you're killing the raid. Just do it. Um, but like earlier in the fight, like I talked about getting wall off and things like that. That is so much better to have them spawn like separated than have it just like, oh, we're walled off and I have to like waddle my way around it.
Yeah.
That's one of the strengths of DK actually is that you can, if you have AMS up, you don't get the trap dot. So when I'm moving the boss, I can hit AMS if I have to walk traps and just like go, and I don't have to worry about the trap dot. Um,
Nice.
but also reducing the frequency of elimination protocol. It's just always going off, and it's just really annoying. Really
Yeah.
annoying.
I would say maybe one like I should my raid leader we were talking about this doing the progression, like the one thing that we talked about with elimination protocol is basically make it not pierce, meaning that
Yeah,
it
it goes
stops
all the
after it
way
hits the
across the
first player.
arena. Yeah,
Yeah, so that I think if it didn't pierce, that might make it slightly easier to deal with, because then you could have elimination protocols move in and people could spread out behind,
right.
because right now you basically, because it pierces and it goes from
It's
essentially a straight line from the boss,
also, yeah,
it
it's
just it just frees up space basically.
it frees up space, but it's also kind of hard to judge sometimes, especially when you have the overlaps with either the bosses moving shortly before your
Yeah.
lines are going off, or you get a blast wave right before. So there's actually okay, a couple of things about blast wave. Blast wave, actually, one more change. Blast wave should not cancel casts.
Okay.
Like all of the knocks that we had last year, all the pushbacks that we had last year did not cancel
Yeah.
casts.
Yeah.
This one just shouldn't cancel casts. It's so annoying that like every 30 seconds your casters just have to stop casting because it's going to get interrupted by blast wave. It's just really annoying. Um anyway, if you get pushed by blast wave while you have lines, the line only changes direction if one of two things happens. One, the boss moves because the tank moved.
Hmm.
So if you have a blood DK, like reason number 3 to have a blood DK, they hit Death's Advance and the boss doesn't move. Um, or two, you get pushed into a wall. And so the wall, you'll like slide along the wall and that will change the direction of the arrow. But those are the only two cases where your elimination protocol arrow actually changes directions as a result of blast wave. So you actually can, like, if you know that you have a blood decay, so you never have to deal with the first case, you can
Hmm.
position so that your arrow never changes after a blast wave by just never getting pushed into a wall. Now, that's in theory. In practice, because of the way that the lines work, like you mentioned, that they are just like they pierce, and the pushback knocks you back 2 spaces, and sometimes there's just not 2 spaces that you can be at without getting pushed into the wall, because the whole arena is only like 6 spaces across.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so, like,
We
in theory you can like really play around it. In practice, you do not have the ability to play around it that much past the end. So you really just have to, on the ones where you get the blast wave, there's only two where you get blast wave and then get the elimination protocol. They're front loaded. The first one's at like 20 seconds into the fight, and the
Yeah.
next one's at like 2 minutes into the fight. And then after that, you always have the blast wave go off after elimination protocol.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. We've even seen like that's the other thing too is like with the one tactical destruction. I think it's the second tactical destruction overlaps. One of those two we found like early on it was difficult to gauge where players were in relation to the boss because you're so far away and
Yeah.
the boss has stopped to cast something. So like we've said like tactical or the lines or whatever go to the sides, but even then like I've killed myself because there was a rogue close and I was further back and didn't notice it and we both got
Yeah.
cleaved by
I
the
got
thing.
killed by one, so I was, taking the boss, watching my
Yeah.
feet, try to set up for trap spawns, and then we had a range that was behind me, like way behind me. I'm standing with my back to a trap, and like the arrow is going into the trap because I'm right at the edge of it. And I
Yeah.
didn't see it, and I had been clipped by one earlier, and um
The debuff.
I had the debuff as a result, so I just got hit by it and just like bam, dead. I had already blown purgatory on some other shenanigans, but it was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah, no. It's stupid and like
and
yeah,
it's not
I
their
mean
fault. Like they had a really smart positioning idea because nobody was standing on those traps, right? I'm the only
yeah.
one in that area, and we did tell people, like, if you're gonna hit somebody, hit the tank because they can live it. That happened to be the one situation that I couldn't live it.
Yeah, exactly.
But like
Exactly.
that,
Yeah.
it's it's so close to being like a good fight, and it is actually. I have had fun progressing it, but it's kind of having fun in spite of these elements of the boss fight, right? It's having fun
Yeah.
because honestly, part of it. So okay, I'm gonna pull up a chart here.
Yeah.
Okay, uh, this is the prog stats chart for just like statistics about kills of Zskarn. So it's
Mhm.
this is not complete data. This is just a sample of data. All this stuff. Anyway, there's a really important chart here that I want to highlight. It's the number of kills versus kill date chart, and you can see the very clearly when people figured out the meme strat, and
Yep.
there's like this huge spike for 6 days or something, 5 days, and then
It
they
just
nerfed the
flattens
bot.
out.
They nerfed the boss on May 26th, and it just like flattens, just flatlines. There's no recorded kills for like several days, and then it's starting to pick back up. Like, but it's very clear that the difficulty of the boss is, I mean, it's more in line with what the original strat people were doing was, but it's way out of line with the difficulty of the meme strat, and I think that's only become more clear to me as we've pulled it, because like some of the things we've wiped to, right, like we've wiped to not being able to get the golems grouped and killed in time,
Yeah.
and on the meme strat you literally ignore them. You want them to run around and activate traps because that's how you get to go to the safe zone at 30 seconds into the fight.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's it is I mean I'm glad they didn't pull a Kel'Thuzad on it and essentially just turn it into or even yeah, like a Kel'Thuzad in terms of just turning it into like an easy fight that just had slightly different mechanics, right? That you had to play around or like a slightly different strategy. But But yeah, I mean, I would. It's yeah, it's the. It just feels like I still feel like I think if I was going back through this, like I think slowing down trap spawn rate would help. I think it's still a difficult fight, even if trap spawn like 50%. Maybe not, if it's every, 30 seconds, maybe like they move it to every like 40 seconds or every 45 seconds, right? In terms of trap spawns. I think that potentially is enough to make it
Yeah.
not as bad. Um, but yeah, I think it's funny. The part that I thought would be the worst, which is the tactical destruction being baited on where most of the players are, is probably like my least issue with the entire
Yeah. It's
fight.
so we are the closest that my guild has ever been to like world first high end kind of progression
Yeah.
where there's no VODs out there, there's no logs. You're kind of figuring out the strategy for yourself because it's so different. Like the
Yep.
first 5-ish minutes of the fight are pretty similar, but then the constraints are different because you're not setting up to go to the safe zone at the end.
Right.
So the kind of constraints are different. Um, it is so one of the interesting things about having run prog stats for like 4 years now is that you get to see the reality of how progression works on these bosses, where you have the early guilds that kill it, that take, you know, basically progression time over the course of the tier stays level. The early guilds kill it faster than in
Hmm.
terms of time spent than pretty much anybody else. And then it goes up a bit and it kind of levels out. And then as it continues creeping up just bit by bit by bit, there's nerfs that come in, there's gear that comes in that kind of tones it back down. Um, the early guilds that killed this boss spent about 5 hours progressing it. The ones that logged it on prog stats. Uh, it is currently at like 6 to 8 to 10 hours
Yeah.
post buff. And for the meme strat, it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah, which just it's just hilarious.
So
So.
like it's hard to like normally when you look at one of these, like if you look at Rashok, right? The
Hmm.
kind of early guilds that killed it spent like 4 hours on it. Everybody after that is kind of like spending more like 6 to 8 to 9 hours on it, and that's just kind of normal. Like we're not Fat Shark Yes or whatever. Kind of
Yeah.
we're not on that level. So it's that's kind of normal. And so in some ways it's like if you ignore the meme strat part of Zskarn, it all is kind of in line with a regular boss in terms of like the difficulty curve. But it just feels so bad. Oh my god.
Yeah. I
Like
think it's funny. I think if it was a longer boss, I think it would feel even worse and probably give like, Halandras like issues, right? Like it'd be that
yeah.
type of like mid-tier like 100 pull boss. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
this tier is just all kinds of hosed at this point.
yeah. Um but yeah, so we're still progressing, and I think in terms of like we're just gonna extend, I think, from here on out. Like I think
We
we'll
extended this
still.
week.
Oh,
we
you did extend. You started
Yeah.
that. Okay. We
We
still care.
had
We
so last Sunday we did not get Rashok. We
okay.
had a lot of low percent wipes. We had a lot of like 3% wipes where we just were not quite making it through the last phase with enough people alive to kill it after the final slam. Um, I think a lot of the issue was healing cooldowns, which I had set, and I got some help from people from former one of our former healing officers who is now just a regular healer, and was like, okay, isn't working. Please, for the love of God, give me some help. And so learned a lot from him going through them, which is very very helpful. We came in this week and we 3-shot it,
Nice.
which was very satisfying to knock it out like that. And now we're on Zskarn. Zskarn again, like 6 to 10 hour boss. We technically have like 8 hours to sink into it this week, so there is a chance that we can kill it on night, I guess. But
Yeah.
it's just like we compare that to the other team in our guild that like killed Rashok and then knocked out Zskarn in 40 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely sucks in terms of like the ranking side of it, right? Because yeah, once you get through Skarn, it feels like you're just that much further ahead. You're 2-3 days ahead. Which translates to a guild that if you only raid 2 days a week, that's like a week or two ahead in terms of progression, right?
Yep.
Um, But yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I guess we didn't really talk about. We just sort of jumped right into Skarn. But yeah, in terms of like progression on our side, I think we did back clear everything. We actually cleared pretty much. We did a full heroic clear. We did. a normal clear for just trinkets,
Yeah.
and then cleared all of Mythic, and then killed Rashok in like 5 pulls all on Tuesday. We had like a really good
Wow.
Tuesday.
That's
Yeah,
killer. Yeah.
yeah. We I don't we think we wiped to Forgotten Experiments once. Everything else was a one shot in Mythic.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we had a really solid sort of back clear, and then yeah, Rashok fell over. So
If
we
the
got like,
if the mythic gear weren't like kind of made irrelevant by the upgrade system, this would be a great tier to like not extend for a
oh
while
yeah,
because it's
yeah.
very like you could definitely kind of cruise through reclear, but 441 gear is just not worth it.
Now when you can upgrade heroic to 437 and it takes an hour to clear heroic, right? Like it.
Heroic goes to 441.
Oh, does oh sorry. So yeah, so heroic comes up to the at least the early mythic bosses. So there's no point in re-clearing early mythic boss. You just extend.
Right.
And if you need specific gear from heroic, you just go and kill those bosses, which I think that'll be our plan. So we got the skip now. So I think our plan is we'll still clear mythic trinket bosses on Tuesday and then go in, or sorry,
Heroic
heroic
trinket
trinket
bosses.
bosses on Tuesday, yeah. And then go into mythic, and we're just extending from now. So
We actually had crazy trinket luck this week too. We got two heroic Rashok's hearts. We got a mythic Rashok heart. We got a
nice.
mythic Jaren, which is not a trinket, but you know, same deal. We got a
Yeah.
heroic ominous essence. We got a heroic elementium, whatever anvil thing.
Yeah, the anvil.
We got a heroic like avoidance Kazara trinket for a healer. Um,
Nice.
just like if it like we didn't. We also got a normal and a heroic beacon to the beyond.
Shit. Yeah, you guys had really good luck. That's awesome.
No dragon firebomb this.
We got one bomb dispenser on normal on
Yeah.
Thursday because we did just like the first
Yeah.
two and last or whatever. We did like the skip on normal, and then Thursday came back, I guess, for the 1 or 2 trinket bosses. But
I'm
yeah.
also my monk is still using Drogbar rocks as a drink. That
Nice. Nice.
such a stupid thing.
That's so funny.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's crazy the gearing piece. But yeah, I mean we're also in extend mode till whatever Sakureth dies. But yeah, I'm not looking forward to this week coming up in terms of Prague. It's not it just feels rough every time we go in there. So um
I'm hopeful that tonight, like it, we made real progress on Zskarn on Friday. We went from like wiping on the first tactical destruction, wiping on the second tactical destruction, to actually making it through both with too many golem casts getting off, but making it through both. And so
yeah.
there is like real progression here. There's something to this that not every boss has, where some bosses you don't really kind of continuously progress through the boss. You kind of have one choke point and then you get through that and the boss dies, especially when you look at like earlier mid-tier bosses.
Hmm.
That's pretty common. Or you just kind of like have random wipes the whole time. Something like Kel'Thuzad, where you just like,
Yeah.
we're dead.
Yeah, DPS was off. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but this one, there is real kind of progression through the whole fight that not isn't always there on an early boss. And so it's like, it's just so close to being good. So close to being
Yeah.
good. And it just needs a few, like, honestly, I would almost say quality of life changes. Because some of these aren't even necessarily about difficulty. Like, yes, in a like amount of time it takes to progress the boss sense, it will reduce the amount of time it takes to progress the boss, but it's not about like making it easier to handle the mechanics, at least in my opinion, not making it easier to
Yeah.
handle the mechanics. It's about making it less frustrating and less, likely that you just get trolled by RNG.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like yeah, it's that idea where like because it's random, like it's not the like it's somewhat the personal responsibility type boss, but it's more of just like did I move to the right side of the trap that kept me in range so I didn't die to the mechanic that's going to do damage to me, right? Or
Yeah.
like like did I position myself cuz like I'm a big proponent of like I do boss fights generally once we kill it, I do it the same time, the same way every time. So like
Yeah.
I try not to change like healing cooldowns, try not to change like my positioning, but like with a boss like this,
Yeah. I
it's just
think
frustrating.
one of the things about elimination protocol being so frequent is it actually makes it really, really hard to adjust on the fly. Like
Yeah.
as a tank, I'm doing boss positioning and I want to adjust on the fly when we have different trap spawns. I want to go like, okay, we got a trap spawn where I was going to go. I'm going to go to this spot instead, but I can't actually do that because of
Kill a
elimination
bunch of
protocol
people.
being on, all the time. And so you could move during elimination protocol, right? It happens too often. You can't just not move elimination protocol.
Yeah.
But it happens so frequently and it overlaps so often with places where you want to, be doing these moves that it's just like I can't react to this, because if I do react to this, it puts 4 other people at least in a position where they can't react and then they die. So we're going to
Yeah.
get double bad traps because I can't move the boss into a better position.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's, yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, we'll probably talk a little bit more about this next week too, in terms of like how progression's going. Hopefully, I mean, hopefully you get it tonight and you can move on to getting Magmarex down pretty quickly.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
But yeah, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how progression goes. All right, we still have about 20 minutes. We can talk a little bit about there's news, a little bit more news that we haven't touched on.
Yep.
Sort of doing this sort of episode in reverse, I feel like.
Yeah.
But we did a couple things I wanted to talk about just quickly was we did get the June trading post sort of
Oh, yeah.
launched. And it's Mount City, my favorite time of the year. So there's actually, I think there's 3 mounts in the trading post this month. You've got like the Royal Swarmers Reigns, which is a B mount, which is kind of cool. These were much more prevalent in I feel like in like BFA. A bunch of like B mounts were there. So you get the Swarmers Reigns, which is cool. You also get the Cindermane Charger, which is sort of a fire horse, which looks pretty awesome. Um, I don't care about anything else, but the mounts look cool. So I've got to actually do some grinding this month. Uh, for some
You have to actually play the game.
I have to play the game, unfortunately, to get some coins for some mounts. But yeah, and then the bonus reward for like, of course, completing your trading post is Quacks, which is a parrot mount,
Yeah,
which actually looks really cool.
if you don't
It's
have
like
the
a
parrot
purple.
from Freehold, this is a recolor of the parrot from Freehold that you can just
Yeah.
get. Um, also want to shout out to there's fire horns that you can get. It's a helmet from Trading Post this month as well. That looks not a thing that goes with every transmog for sure, but very unique.
Weren't those like a Amazon Prime gaming thing at one point or something? Or like didn't I feel like those were a part of you had to pay for them. Maybe I'm thinking of something different.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't recognize it, but I could just be missing it. The,
Gotcha.
the
Oh, they were a paid cosmetic item at one point. Oh,
yeah.
because they did the fire horns, they did the ice ones, and they did one
Oh,
other
okay.
like as like the horn update or whatever. I think it was like $15 for all of them. So
Gotcha.
at the time,
Interesting.
but that's trading post for this month. I mean, it's a bunch like all I care about is the months. There is, I guess, a bee pet you can buy if you're into pets. I don't. I'm
I
not a
actually
Pokemon
saw that and I
person.
was like, oh man, that's such a cool amount, and it's not a mount.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Yeah. But cool, yeah, Trading Post is live. Again, I think that's a super cool thing just in the game. So um and then in terms of PTR updates, they're the only thing new this week is they did open up the Megadungeon. So I think it's called Dawn of the Infinite is live now on PTR, so you can jump in there and test it out. Honestly haven't been on I did that key on my augmentation evoker earlier this week, but haven't really been on PTR to test out this dungeon. It's a mega dungeon. It's similar to like Mechagon was and Karazhan of old. And these are always super cool. So it'll be fun to. I mean, I guess as a person who only cares about like getting the best stuff and being slightly min maxy with this, I'll probably end up doing this once, just to see it, and then maybe twice, once on normal, once on mythic. But
And
no, it'll be fun.
I assume it'll be in the season 3 Mythic Plus.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll do it in myth. You'll probably split again, do like half it, yeah, half
Yeah.
and half. But yeah, no, this comes out with this patch. So another mega dungeon. These have always been cool. I mean, Karazhan, I think is the first one was super cool, and then even Mechagon was fun. The bots were fun to mess around with, and then what was it Tazavesh from
Yeah.
Shadowlands? Sort of fun, I'll say. Some of the bosses were a little bit meh. But but as a dungeon as a whole, I think it was fine. I mean, to be fair, the only boss I absolutely hated was the line boss, where that would like split off the arena and like you had to port
What?
with the
That was the
shapes.
best boss.
Okay, like no, because like there would like some of those shapes would like you literally had half a second to react to where like the circle spawned, you're
Oh,
gonna eat the dot because of the way it worked, or like you literally had to do like some sort of like geometric thing in your head. Like I gotta go square and then circle back to square, but then I'm gonna take moon and then I'll get to where the boss jumps. Because like we've had the boss like where you have to interrupt it before you get the dot. That's how
yeah,
this boss worked like twice, I think. And like we had it where like it would jump to like a spot where you had to take like 4 portals to get there, and then
yeah.
like you just die because somebody screwed
I
up.
I like that boss. That was a good boss.
That's that's fair. But yeah, Mega Dungeon Time is back, which is fun. Um, but yeah, and then I think the only final thing is there will be a patch coming up this week, um, with some updates. So to both Brewmaster and Mistweaver Monk. So I don't know if you want to go through the
Let's do the mystery for one first because I think that's a little
okay.
bit easier to get through.
It's super simple. It's a 3% healing increase. It's not exciting or crazy. It's just a nice, I think, I'm not even gonna call it a quality of life change. It's just we get 3% more healing for whatever reason. Um, I don't particularly know why, but
Yeah, no,
a
don't look
buff
and
is
give
a
towards in
buff.
the mouth. Yep.
Now, a buff's a buff. There weren't any other at least healing changes to the other healers. I think Devastation, or sorry, Preservation Evoker got an damage increase to Disintegrate.
Okay.
But in general, there's been no like healing buffs to any of the other healers. So we're the only ones. Key fact doesn't apply in PvP, and there were a bunch of Mistweaver Monk PvP updates. But I don't PvP, so I honestly don't know exactly what it meant. I think they've
It looks like they nerfed
basically
it a bunch.
yeah, I think they
A bunch of
nerfed a
mana
bunch of the
costs.
mana efficiency stuff for Mistweaver. So, um, but yeah, nice 3% buff to Mistweaver. So,
So Brewmaster is getting kind of a compensation buff for the Weapons of Order change. We talked about the
nice.
Weapons of Order change last week. Basically, it made it so that you were no longer getting your Weapons of Order damage amp applied to non-spec spells and effects. So no more embellishments, no more trinkets, no more weapon effects, none of that. Um, and that was pretty sizable nerf. Very wide range of nerf too, depending on what kind of gear you had. If you were fully bissed out and you were getting all of your like Beacon to the Beyond hits inside your Weapons of Order, it was 12 to 13%. If you did not have that kind of gear, it was more like 6 to 7%. So it was very kind of like widely dispersed in terms of how much of a nerf it was. We are getting a number of buffs. So specifically, it is all ability damage goes up by 3%. Rising Sun kick damage goes up by 10%, which is kind of fun because that's not a spell that has historically been a Brewmaster spell.
Hmm.
Blackout kick damage increased by 30%, and Tiger Palm damage increased by 30%. Um, so, what this boils down to is still being worked out. Because, in particular, the Blackout kick change really pushes us in the direction of playing Shard Passions instead of playing Dragonfire Brew.
Cool.
So, that is going to like there's bigger implications for the overall rotation that it makes it hard to figure out what the actual like numbers buff is here. At minimum, you're looking at basically compensating for that nerf if you were on the lower end of
Hmm.
6-ish 7-ish% overall, um, with just current talents if you're using a regular talent build. Now there's also an unlisted hotfix to Bone Dust Brew and Bountiful Brew. So
Okay.
Bountiful Brew is the one that triggers a free Bone Dust Brew on your target periodically, just like from hitting them. Previously, they did not stack. So like if you had a proc while you had Bone Dust Brew on the target, it would just go back to the max duration and just. And if you cast it while you had the proc on the target, again, just go back to the max duration. No stacking, no extending. Uh, it now extends up to 20
Ah.
seconds, so it's not totally uncapped. But this is this makes the Bountiful Brew talent significantly better, because you're no longer dealing with like if you had back to back procs, the second proc would get more or less entirely wasted. you would get like 2 seconds of duration out of it instead of 8 seconds, 10 seconds. So now you get a lot more from that talent as well. So all of these things combined, you're looking at like 6 to 7% increased damage. If Charred Passions ends up being the play, that's going to be a really interesting thing because that build is more rotationally intense to pull off. Like, one of the hardest things about the Brewmaster rotation is actually fitting all of your Blackout kicks in while casting your other spells because Blackout kick has such a low cooldown. It's a very important spell, but you can't just like sit there waiting on it to come off of cooldown. You have other stuff to push. You have a lot of buttons to push, and a
Yeah.
lot of places to spin. So Charred Passions build requires you to be casting Blackout Kick a lot. And
Hmm.
so on paper, if that ends up being the best, the difficulty of playing the Brewmaster rotation in single target is going to go up more. Um, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. That's always the fun. Like I find that type of stuff the most interesting where like you have a build that like theoretically is your best sort of build, whether that's for damage or for healing. But
Right.
like actually playing it in practice is like if you're not playing it at a perfect level, it's almost worse to play.
Yeah.
And so like there's that
That's
caveat of like, yeah, here's like your theoretical max, here's what you want to do. But like if you screw up even like two GCDs and this massive chain of GCDs, like you're essentially like losing all the benefit from like
yeah.
playing it. You might as well just play like the other build.
And that's right now what we currently have going on between Charred Passions and Dragonfire Brew. In theory, Charred Passions is better right now
Hmm.
before the buff. In practice, it's just not enough better to make up for the fact that if you're not getting like very high casts of Blackout Kick,
Hmm.
to make up for the fact that with Dragonfire Brew, you just like push the button when it's off cooldown.
Yeah. 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 That's the same like clouded focus and ancient teachings issue we had for like the start of this tier, or the start of this expansion, which is like in Mistweaver Land. It was like technically clouded focus was better on paper, but like in practice playing it, particularly I guess for us it was like a mana constraint 2 issue, but playing it just wasn't enough ahead to warrant like the complexity of like actually playing that build. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is gonna be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I think this actually pushes Shard Passions to be enough better that it could end up seeing more play, and actually be worth it, even with mistakes in the rotation. And we're not talking like it's not rotationally complex in that it's like a bunch of cast sequences that you have to execute correctly in order to do good damage. It's more of just like you have this low cooldown ability that has cooldown conflicts with every other ability in your kit, and you
Right.
just have to be pushing all of them all of the time and know when it's correct to delay one of them for another. And so Dragonfire Brew is just easier because it simplifies the whole like decision process. Like, do I push this or this? Well, it's easy. You push this. You push Breath
Right.
of Fire. Like, if you can push Breath of Fire, you push Breath of Fire, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
Charred
exactly.
Passions is a little bit more involved, where you have like you want to be maintaining Rushing Jade Wind, you want to be maintaining um, your Breath of Fire. You ideally also play it with Blackout combo, which then adds another thing where you want to be spending your Blackout combos on certain things for maximum benefit. And then of course you need to be using your Blackout kick more because Charred Passion buffs Blackout kick.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, uh,
That's way too hard in my mind.
it's like it's doable. It's just the kind of thing where like you go and you play Blood DK, and it's just like push Heart Strike and you don't let Bone Shield drop, and you're like 80% of the way there, uh,
Yeah.
and you just like stand in Death and Decay, you push Heart Strike, you don't let Blood Boil cap, and you're like, you're,
Yeah, exactly.
and then
Yeah.
Brewmaster's over here like you maintain this and this, you spend these here, and you have these three very short cooldowns that you have to like be uh, making sure they all stay on cooldown all the time, and it's just a
Yeah.
little bit harder.
Plus you have the idea of like then you have to worry about where the boss is positioning, like mechanics
Right.
coming up,
And
taunting,
that's
yeah,
really
on top of it.
something that I think it will actually be better in practice if you are playing Mythic to stick with Dragonfire Brew. For a lot of people, at least until you're deeper in. like progression on the boss and more comfortable with the boss,
Yeah,
because just not having to think about your rotation is actually worth both damage, but it's worth pulls. It's worth like, you can focus on the boss and getting the boss to the right spot and not getting absolutely stomped by, messing up a tank swap, or messing
exactly.
up a mechanic. And so there's something to be said for playing the easy rotation, even if it's
Yeah.
behind.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's yeah. Once you layer in like actually doing the fights, like whether that's in Raid or even in Mythic Plus, like yeah, having an easier rotation where you can spend that sort of brain power, that focus on like, okay, where am I moving the boss, or what cooldowns am I using here? Like, what specific position do I need to be in? What's coming up next, right? You can spend those sort of brain cycles thinking about that versus thinking about, okay,
Yeah.
I'm about to have to spend blackout kick, but I also have this other ability that's coming off cooldown. So like, which do I hit first? And like, you know, not delaying either one as best we can. So yeah, no.
Yeah.
But cool. I mean, glad that Brewmaster's getting buffs. I mean, it sounds like yeah, they at least tried to, if not fully compensated for the weapons of order
Yeah,
changes.
we will see. There's still a lot of rankings. Like if you look at the
Hmm.
top ranks on a bunch of mythic fights, they're still pre-nerf
Yeah,
because it was really strong. Um, and we will see if it continues to be a problem.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, well, cool. Well, yeah, that's I mean, awesome. Yeah, good monk week. Except if you're a windwalker, I think they
Windwalker's
still are on.
fine. Is it actually? I should, before anybody yells at me in the comments about saying Windwalker is fine, I'm gonna go check. Is Windwalker fine? Er,
Let's see. Oh, improving Windwalker. Babs went full on my idea of like setting up a bunch of forum posts of like
oh boy,
good
Babs.
ideas for Windwalker changes. That's crazy.
We're gonna do Forgotten Experiment. That's a relatively early boss. It's got some cleave on it. Windwalker is dead middle. Like, okay, but it's a lot of two target on Mythic, right? Look at
Yeah.
Rashok. Uh, near the bottom on Rashok.
Is it losing to Feral Druid?
Yes,
Okay, well then they're
barely.
not a
Like they're
class.
they're like equal. Let me
They're
actually pull this up. They're like equal. The median damage number is the same for both of them at about 103.8k, and the max value for Feral is just way higher, basically.
yeah.
But there's also not very many parses because Ashok is kind of a hard boss, and not a lot of people have gotten through it yet. Like if you look at another single target boss, Kazara has a bajillion kills, and Windwalker is bottom quarter, but
That's still not bad.
the bottom half is all kind of like in the same ballpark, and it's just the
Yeah, a lot of
top
them.
that kind of pulls away. So
Yeah.
it's like Windwalker is worse, but it's not unplayably bad.
Yeah.
Then again, neither is Brewmaster, so maybe the Brewmaster class dev just likes us more.
That's true. By the way, that's right. It's so funny looking at some of the DPS distributions on that, where like inside of a spec, where like you have like the rogue classes are really narrow band, where like most
Yeah,
rogue players do very similar damage. Then you have like mages who are like just literally like
yeah,
like the spread is massive. I think with Arcane.
yeah.
Um, but cool. No, I think it's funny. I didn't think we'd actually get a full 90 minutes in because there was like nothing to talk about. But we had I
Hey,
think a
we
good
can complain
conversation.
about Zskarn all day
Yeah, well, it's
long.
true. That's true. That could be its own 90-minute episode. But yeah, good
Yeah,
conversation on Scar and good D4. I'm excited. I can't wait to get back into D4. I really want to
yeah.
get
I
to.
got more raid prep to do. Downside
That's
of
right.
raiding on the weekend, we got bit by raiding on the weekend 2 weeks in a row. Week one by the fact that we didn't raid until after the Zskarn like nerfs went in,
Yeah.
which is frustrating. And then two, this week D4 came out the day like on Thursday, but I've been busy with raid prep stuff like all
Oh
weekend,
yeah.
so I have not played very much of it.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a good slow burn game. I think the other thing too that helps D4, just one final comment, is their seasonal stuff doesn't start for like 2 months.
right,
So basically have like this 2 month lull period of like
just play the
not
game,
like
have fun.
leveling up, yeah, have fun, and then like the seasonal stuff start and you can start to like min max and do that. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I'm
yeah,
excited to see how this ends because like I said, I've looked at nothing about the game other than how to get a mount. It was like the one thing because I was like,
yeah,
I'm just gonna take me forever to go back at all these dungeons. Like when do I get a mount? And then maybe I'll spend some time
yeah,
like running through the world. But yeah,
yeah.
no, cool.
That is going to be it for our show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support it and the other work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, You can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord. It is the best place to keep up to date on what the new rotation and build is going to look like for Brewmaster with these changes. Or, complain about the 3% buff not actually solving any of Mistweaver's problems.
Exactly.
Or about Windwalker not getting buffed at all.
They don't matter.
Yeah. That is going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.